All right, we'll get going now. Thank you all for being here. My name is Adam Braver. I'm the Assistant Dean of the Library, and on behalf of the Dean, Kevin Kidd, we welcome you to today's Talking the Library program. This program was founded by an alumnus called Mary Teft White, who graduated from Roger Williams late in her life. She graduated in her 70s, not in the 70s, but in her 70s, and she endowed this space and this program through a gift to the university, with the idea that students could find inspiration by hearing from people who have been leaders in their various fields. Many of us know that Roger Williams University is housed on the land of the Pokanoket tribe, part of the larger Narragansett people, and it is the site of King Philip's seat, a traditional meeting and leadership place for the Pokanoket. The awareness of where the university has been situated has not been taken lightly here. From past calls by students and faculty to have a formal land acknowledgement, to other questions of reconciliation, honoring, and general understanding of the significance of the land. Epistemologically speaking, part of being responsible guests or tenants is learning more about who came before us, where we are, and what we should do now that we are here. And part of that learning comes through programs such as this afternoon's program. We are honored and pleased to welcome Paula Peters, a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag, who through her company Smoke Signals promotes cultural understanding and dialogue through designing exhibits, sharing public art, producing videos, and writing narratives that reflect Native communities. Today, as part of our mission of learning, Paula will talk about wampum, both in terms of its history and its significance. So please welcome Paula Peters.
Kutabatanamu. Wanikisak natasuis sonkwabin nutabas masapiak. That's my traditional greeting in the Wampanoag language, and what I basically just said is I thank you all for having me here, and I gave you my traditional name, which is Sonkwabin, means cool wind, or cool breeze if you want to be a little more sassy, and I talked about where I'm from, which is from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, which Adam already told you. I'm here today to bring you the story of our wampum belt, but I wanted to start off actually by talking a little bit about Roger Williams. Because we as Algonquin speaking people are very grateful to the contributions of Roger Williams. His book, The Key to the Language of the Americas, is part of what helps to inform us to recover our language. Part of what enabled me to just make that introduction. And for that, I am incredibly grateful. So if you didn't know that about your college, you should know it now. I want to bring you now a presentation on, okay, I can move this a little bit. And I may have to stop a little bit. I've been having shortness of breath, which I did just go get taken care of with my doctor. They're gonna, I don't have anything contagious or anything, but I may have to stop and recover a little bit, but I'm gonna be fine. So, wampum jewelry and the adornments that are made from the shell of the quahog are part of a tradition among the Wampanoag that is thousands of years old. You might have noticed that I am wearing today a lot of wampum. Well, it's not considered a lot among my people, but I have wampum necklace, I have a wampum bracelet, I have wampum in my ring, and I have wampum earrings. The word wampum quite literally means white shell bead, but the word wampum, or the term, actually refers to all of the beads that are made from the quahog shell, whether they are white, as in most of the shell, or the shades of color from a light violet to a dark as night purple that's found at the hinge of the shell. Have any of you ever cracked open a quahog and seen that remarkable array of color. It's just fabulous. These beads were painstakingly made with primitive tools and often woven into belts that, like a tapestry, told a story of the people who made it. These belts were held by tribal leaders, and they would continue to collect new stories as artisans crafted new beads and added them to each belt. So no belt was ever really finished. Wampanoag and all people of Eastern tribes who lived on the sea appreciated these wampum belts and wampum jewelry. But for the colonists, the wampum took on the nature of currency. You probably have heard that slang used sometime. In exchange for money, they call it wampum. But for the Wampanoag, it has always been a treasure far more valuable in a cultural and spiritual sense. It was not simply money to be traded for goods, but sacredly symbolic of our traditions and our heritage. There was one such wampum belt that was of great importance to the Wampanoag that continues to this day to be the subject of a great search. In his lifetime, Metacom was a witness to dramatic change in his homeland and injustice to his people as a result of colonization and the colonial laws imposed upon his people. You may more familiarly know him as King Philip, just as Adam just referred to King Philip's seat, which is here. That was the name that the English gave him. They called him King Philip. He was the son of the Massasoit Usamigwin. That's another name that oftentimes doesn't get recognized as it should, because the term Massasoit is oftentimes just applied to Usamigwin, that he had a name. Massasoit just means great leader, and his name Usamigwin means yellow feather. That Wampanoag leader, Usamigwin, made the first treaty with the Plymouth colonists in 1621. And from 1621 until his death in 1661, his people had become pretty overwhelmed by colonization. By the time Metacom ascended to the leadership of the Wampanoag, the tribe had suffered greatly due to loss of land and subjugation to English law. Now that's really tight summarization of what happened in that nearly 50 years. But this talk isn't about King Philip's War. So I'm gonna let you all stew on that for a moment. Just know that it wasn't a good time for the Wampanoag. The resulting conflict, though, would bear the name King Philip's War. King Philip's War raged on for more than a year with devastating casualties on both sides, and to this day it is known as the bloodiest conflict that was ever fought on American soil. Metacom was assassinated at the end of that war on August 12th in 1676, and at the time of his death, he carried with him a glorious wampum belt that was removed from him and was taken as a spoil of war. Oh, I forgot to tell you that I get to stop talking every now and then and show you some of the fabulous footage that is created to support the exhibit. And they're actually good stories told. So I get to take a break. In his diary of King Philip's War, Benjamin Church describes the wampum belt that belonged to Metacom. Opening his pack, he pulled out Philip's belt, curiously wrought with wampum, being 9 inches broad, wrought with black and white wampum in various figures and flowers and pictures of many birds and beasts. These were Philip's royalties, which he was wont to adorn himself with when he sat in state.
The term wampum comes from wampum peak, which literally means shell beads in the Wampanoag language. They've been made for millennia by indigenous people in New England. Because they are these different colors of beads, they can be used in a binary signaling system. And because they were so valuable and so widespread among Native nations, when European colonists arrived, particularly the Dutch and the English, they started using these beads as a substitute for European currency. But they were not universally used by Native nations as money. So they do not equate with Indian money. They simply equate with a powerful and valuable substance that was for a time used as a substitute for money.
Many people feel wampum is all about currency. They've been taught this, like many other misnomers about New England tribes. It has nothing to do really with money. My understanding is that people within the tribe, the spiritual people, the important people of the tribe, were well adorned with wampum.
I would say that wampum belts were the closest thing to written history for Wampanoag people. In terms of spiritual use and in ceremonies, they are like a document. They are very critical to preserving our traditions and our story and our heritage.
Historically, wampum was used in several different forms as adornment for beautiful objects to wear in the ears and around the neck and around the perimeters of the body. Wampum was used in the form of disc beads as decorative pieces, adornment pieces, but in the form of tubular beads, that's when wampum really reached a very unique form of being able to signal understandings.
It just brings back an ancestral meaning, something that I feel is lost today in almost everything that we do. It's undeniably Native American, Northeastern, and undeniably Wampanoag. And for me, it's the only thing that I know for sure, because history gets twisted in one way or another. It's the only thing I can be sure that is the Quina Wampanoag.
All the things from the past, we still feel that today. We're coastal people. We are the ones that had the quahogs. It's hard to put it into words how spiritually connected we are to wampum and integral it is to my nation.
After Metacom's belt was taken, Benjamin Church turned the belt over to the governor of Plymouth Colony, who was Josiah Winslow. Josiah Winslow was seeking to get favor from the king. He had written a war report and was delivering spoils of war back to the King of England. Josiah handed them to his brother-in-law, Waldegrave Paula. Waldegrave then took them across to England, where it's unclear what happened to them after that, but they were never delivered to the king. That's the last we know of it.
So yes, we have a missing belt. But as people in the America and in America and in the United Kingdom began to plan a commemoration of the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower, I know this sounds like a stretch right now, but I'm going to bring you home. They began talking about how they might honor the sacrifice of the Wampanoag and be inclusive of the Wampanoag story in the 2020 commemorative events. My first reaction was when they asked me, they did come to me and they asked me would I participate and head a committee of Wampanoag people to do this. And I said, hell no. Because a little backstory to that is that in 1970, there was a 350th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower. And lots of ceremony, lots of events were planned. And they, at that time, invited one of our tribal leaders to go and speak. And when they requested to see his remarks, they censored him. They asked him to change what he had said. It's a pretty famous speech that was written by Frank James, and you can find it online if you wanted to see it. He refused to alter one word of the truth that was in that speech that he wanted to give, because he talked about not just the welcoming and the good that was exchanged between the Pilgrims and the Indians, but he talked about the earlier times of men being kidnapped, of disease that was brought, of women being raped and pillaged, and of a treaty that was not fair to the people, and of the oppression and wars that befell the Wampanoag. And at the end of the day, it was nothing really to celebrate. So when they told him he couldn't give that speech, he instead went to the top of Coles Hill in Plymouth, which overlooks Plymouth Rock and the Mayflower too. And he gave the speech to probably about 250 people who came from all over the country. The American Indian movement was there in force. And I think the town of Plymouth has yet to recover from that event, which happens now every year on Thanksgiving Day. So with that in the back of my mind, and with people telling me, no, they're not going to listen to you, they're not going to let you speak, they're going to, I said, well, you know what? This is an international platform that we might be able to bring our story forward in. And I gave them some rules. I said, I'm not going to talk about this unless I can talk about how, for the Wampanoag, 400 years doesn't start in 1620. It starts in 1614, when 20 men were stolen from the village of Patuxet and taken into slavery. And only one of those men ever returned 5 years later. That was Squanto. And that's why Squanto learned how to speak English. Stories that school children don't get told regularly. So with that experience, I thought, I'll tell them this and they'll just say, no, go away. But they kind of wrote me a blank check and said, no, you're gonna bring this story forward, you're gonna do what you need to do. So in fact, I did get to interact with the people here in the United States, and I went to England, and we came together on a lot of things. And I really feel at the end of the day that it was the right thing to do. And when I got there, my first reaction to the English people was that, you know what, we should be searching for Metacom's belt. And I went and I brought pieces of wampum that were probably about this big, and I delivered them to everybody that I saw. I said, this is what I'm looking for. Because they didn't know. They had no idea what wampum was, even though there were these beautiful pieces in the archives. They really didn't know. So when I did get to visit the British Museum, they revealed many examples of wampum, all with really poor provenance. So we weren't able to say, where exactly it came from. We had some good ideas, but none of them matched the description of Metacom's belt. The engagement, however, established a relationship with the people in the UK who wanted to do more than just elevate the Wampanoag story. And they inspired actually the British Arts Council to fund the Wampum Belt Project, to create a new wampum belt. And that would then be brought to England, and it would really show people what we were looking for. The design, the beads, and the weaving done entirely by Wampanoag citizens. Here in the US, a team was formed, including myself as project director, Aquina Wampanoag Jason Wittes, who you saw in that video, who was harvesting the quahogs. He does an amazing job at making wampum jewelry. And also Linda Coombs, who is Aquina Wampanoag also, and she is a deeply serious historian. She's the go-to. And we also had Julia Martin, who is an Aquinnah-Wampanoag weaver, and you'll see more from her. The making of the wampum belt was actually going to do two things for us. First, it was going to restore the tradition of wampum belt making, because nobody had done that in a very long time, not on this scale. And as a community-wide project, that had not happened. And then we would secondly create an exhibit that would tell the story of Metacom's belt, and that would show the people of England what we were looking for and really why we were looking for it. Let's see. Oh, I have another video. Did you like that last one? Okay. I think these are good videos.
The belt that belonged to Metacom belongs to the Wampanoag people. We don't know where it is. We don't know who has it. We don't know if it remains in one piece or if it's been divided up amongst many others. But we feel very strongly it is part of our story. It is a document of our history. It is something that is as important to us as the crown jewels would be to the Queen of England. It belongs at home among the Wampanoag.
The importance is immense in educating people. There's such a lack of education as to the indigenous people of the Americas, especially on the East Coast. Many people think we don't exist anymore and we're relics from the past. So it's extremely important to show us as contemporary people.
Wampum is more than just a material complex. It's really a relational complex of the beings that create the beads, the beings who live on the land, whose skin creates the fibers for the warp, the beings who grow from the earth, whose fibers create the weft, or the sinew of the deer. Whatever these component parts are, all of these beings are woven into that object. And then those woven parts are brought together with the words and thoughts and concerns of the human communities that that object is meant to live in and among and between.
For me, when I make the wampum beads, it's not only was it the first thing that my father showed me how to make reluctantly. It took me forever to figure it out. You end up with bloody fingers because you're working on a grinding wheel and you only have so much shell to work with. As you can see in a quahog, you know, the thickest you're gonna get is something like this. So to make a bead that thick, you can't really mess up. You know, you're spinning it on this wheel. For me, it gave me a sense of who I am. What I do through my art, I express who I am without having to say anything. It really does ground me as far as being an Aquinnah-Wampanoag.
I had the honor and privilege of being able to view the collections of wampum belts that are held by the British Museum. I had asked for permission to enter alone first and to pray over the belts in Wampanoag. They're like a living part of our history, and it was their first time to hear their own language in probably 200 or 300 years.
To have the opportunity to be with those belts and to be able to touch them, it just reminded me of a line in the film We Still Live Here, where one of the Wampanoag women says that touching a document that her ancestor had written was like touching their hand. And I guess I kind of felt like that, knowing the person or people that made these belts, and we could touch them, and it was like being with them and touching their hand.
So some of them have to pass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's sometimes a perception that objects become imbued with some sort of spiritual meaning because a ritual is done over them that somehow infuses them with meaning. That's really not the correct way to look at it. The indigenous way of thinking about wampum is that the beads have meaning in and of themselves, in part because they come from these marine beings that live at the margins. They live at the edge of the land and the ocean. So the sense among Indigenous people who use wampum and have used wampum for a very, very long time is that the words spoken into and over the belts are remembered by the objects themselves.
I felt like the belts were listening and hearing their own language for the first time in hundreds of years, perhaps. Being able to pray over them in our own language is really important when we have this opportunity to be in front of them, because they're not just archival items. They're something altogether more special to us.
Belts can remain dormant or silent or unknown or mysterious, but can be reawoken or reanimated if the proper words are spoken over them, if the ceremonial context and the understanding of these living beings and these living objects is restored.
If King Philip's belt was found, is it really his? Is that real? I guess I wouldn't believe it until I saw it and couldn't handle it.
Generations of Wampanoag people have looked for this belt. It's not just me. We have been looking for this belt for 300 years. So just imagine, to find it, to have it home again, what that would mean. It would mean everything to us.
I hope with all my heart that we do find this belt. I don't know what words to put with it if it was actually found.
There are a number of people now, a number of Indigenous people and non-Indigenous allies who are doing that kind of rescue and recovery work, who are on the lookout for lost patrimony and ready to run to it if it appears, and to try to figure out whose it is and who it belongs to. Sometimes they are broken, sometimes they are intact, sometimes they are about to disappear, and you have to grab them before they fall over the cliff. And so I don't know what form it will be in. It will make itself known. And given how many minds are out there thinking about it now, it's even possible this new belt that's being made might call it back. I think that's possible. Yeah.
Marge is a dreamer. But I love that video for a lot of reasons. I think it does a very good job of explaining to people how these things that you might call artifacts are relatives to us, and how important those relatives are to stay within our community. So once we got funded, this wampum belt project debuted at the Mashpee Wampanoag Powwow in July of 2019. And that's where we invited tribal citizens, and it could be Mashpee or Aquina or Herring Pond, or anybody who came from a Wampanoag tribe could come and contribute work to the belt. The beads were all made by bead makers, so there was a smaller group of those. The gentleman that you saw in already 2 of these videos, Jason Wittes, was the manager of all that. He made sure that each bead that came into the project was the right size, and we needed a certain number of purple ones and a certain number of white ones, and so he helped us to keep track of that. But the people who came to the powwow were invited to take part in the weaving of the wampum belt, wampum onto the belt. The first beads were strung by weaving manager Julia Martin, who is an accomplished Aquina Wampanoag weaver. She actually designed the frame that we put the belt on. The warp on the loom is strung with strips of brain-tanned deerskin, and that's the only part of the wampum belt that wasn't made by Wampanoag people. It was contributed to us by a Nipmuc gentleman whose name is Andre Strong Bearheart Gaines, and he was the only one that I knew that could do brain-tanned deer and bring it to us at that time, so I was really glad to have him there. Excuse me. It was really an incredible honor to have my aunt, Amelia Peters Bingham, to string a row of beads on this belt at the Mashpee powwow. And the reason for that is that she was a big part of my inspiration for doing this, because when I was a teenager, back a long, long time ago, but in the late 1970s, I remember my aunt going to the UK, and she went there for a cultural event, but while she was there, she made a point of going to these different places, the archives at the British Museum and other archives at colleges and universities, looking for the wampum belt. And it like sparked something in me, even as a teenager, that was something important that we needed to get back. Over a period of several months, we traveled with the wampum belt on the loom and bringing it to powwows and social gatherings where the Wampanoag people could participate in adding beads. And each hand that touched the wampum belt, we feel as though they were imbuing their spirit into the belt. So it's a really rich project. And we have more video. Oh, why didn't it play? There we go.
Many people in Mashpee primarily have been looking for King Philip's belt for decades, 30 or 40 years. And in an effort to try and locate that belt and to bring it back home, we started this belt project to make a new belt, and we've been slowly weaving the belt ever since, because it's quite a process to make even one bead. So.
This wampum belt made by Wampanoag hands in this modern time period is so, so powerful, because it is an object in and of itself, and it will remember all the hands that have touched it and all the hands that have contributed to weaving it. But I think it will also remember what came before. If not just evoke, it will recall what preceded it.
We went through a whole search to find people who could make the beads for the belt, because within Mashpee and Aquinnah tribes, there are many wampum makers, but not too many that make the type of beads that are needed for the belt.
For me, it gave me a sense of who I am. What I do through my art, I express who I am without having to say anything. It really does ground me as far as being in Aquinnah Wampanoag.
How did people make these centuries ago without electricity, without running water, without, sanding belts and tools that we use now? I always have the opportunity to realize how strong and how smart and how adaptable our people are and were.
Wampum is actually a cylindrical bead drilled vertically. It is what we used in our belts. The reason why they used the quahog shells is because of the beautiful purple. They would use the whelk shell for the white beads, and in the middle of that, when you break it away, it's a pig's tail. The purple beads, the purple is only in the quahog. It's the only place you find the purple. And because it wasn't shaped at all, you would have to start from scratch in making that bead.
So I'm really impressed with your equipment and all this technology, and it just makes me wonder, this is the size of the bead that I saw on the belts that are in the archives in London. And, those were made in the 1600s. How the heck did they do that?
If you didn't have the equipment, if you could trade for the small triangular nails and
Right.
put it at the end of something, but to actually take a deer antler and somehow sharpen it to the point that you could put it on a bow.
So presumably you could use a bow drill, a primitive bow drill, and attach some kind of sharp point to it and do this, but man, it would take a lot.
Yeah, and they would have done it, I think, before they shaped it.
Yeah.
But even still, just to get that shape
Yeah.
on a rock with a piece
Wow.
of string that went through it.
Yeah, I heard about that technique where you string them all together and then just roll.
Rub it back and forth, yeah.
Right. Oh my God.
As you spit water onto them.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
saying that.
Lots of spit,
Yeah.
lots of sinew, oh man. I mean, when you think about it, it's just amazing that such incredible long belts were made and the jewelry that was made and adornments and the work that you do on these is just, they're just really amazing. The design of the belt came as part of a process. It was informed by our community overall. We met with people in Aquinnah and Mashpee and members of the various Wampanoag bands. We were informed by their clan symbols and our knowledge of our history and our creation story, which is why there is a white pine in the center of the belt. That is where we have come from. We are created out of the white pine. It's as important as keeping our language and keeping our dances and keeping our music. It is what makes us Wampanoag. It gives our community, our children, our next generation, something to believe in, something to be proud of.
It's so important to have as many of our tribal members work on the belt. It's an extremely powerful experience just watching the look on their faces as they're working on such a historic, incredible piece.
When you look at how much work went into these belts, as in the case of Metacom's belt, perhaps as long as 9 feet long and 9 inches wide, that's a really, really magnificent piece of work that came from the hearts and the labor of so many people, the bead makers, the weavers, they're all contributing their spirit to it, and it makes it such a major community project. That's why we've done what we've done with this belt.
Well, that's also why it's so important it's a Wampanoag belt.
Yes.
So it's not just a generic Native American object that's a replica, it's not a reproduction, it is a uniquely Wampanoag production. And in a way, it's the first time in centuries that that's come to be. Making the beads, tanning the hides, pulling all the weaving materials together. And it doesn't replicate, but it reanimates that sense of how belts have traditionally been made.
It should never be lost. It won't be lost to us. It won't be lost to anybody who ever sees it. That this belt is belonging to the Wampanoag Nation. It is belonging to the people. If nothing else, we've recovered that tradition.
We're picking up where we left off, and that hopefully this, won't be the first and last belt that we make, that it will, restart tradition, and that other people will get into wampum making and carry it forward, into the future, so that it continues and we continue.
And that's why it's so profound in this case for Mashpee and Aquinnah Wampanoag to step up and say, we're going to handle this process. We're going to reanimate wampum importance and construction and connection for ourselves. So whether or not Metacom's belt resurfaces, they're doing what they need to do to recover that understanding, that relationship with wampum.
So we did travel quite a bit with this project, and we were able to bring it to our tribal powwows and socials. Here is a couple of women who are putting some beads on it in the Mashpee Wampanoag Government Center gymnasium community room. And that little child that is looking on is in fact a tribal member. And she also did get to put some beads on. This is a gentleman who was at the Aquinnah Wampanoag craft fair during that same summer, 2019. And he was just so, I can't tell you how thrilled he was. He was so thrilled that, oh, you brought it, I'm gonna get to put a bead on it, I'm gonna get to be part of this project. So that was really exciting for him. This is a group of women who were at a Unity gathering at the Mashpee Wampanoag tribal lands in Mashpee, and they were equally thrilled to be getting it done. This was a day that Julia brought the belt to the Weedamoo School. We have a school on the tribal grounds that it's not a fully immersion school, but they learn both in English and in Wampanoag at this school, and the students are all tribal members. And then there was times when certain people weren't able to get to one event or another. They would come to my house, and I would just invite whoever. At the end of the day, more than 100 people contributed to the making of beads, the weaving of beads, the informing the design, just everything around the belt. So we really felt strongly that the belt was a Wampanoag belt. It was for the community. There were some folks in the community that were that felt like we were giving the belt away because we were sending it to the UK to be on exhibit, but we felt like that belt needed to do its job and tell our story. So we were. I seem to have lost my mouse. But there we go. The project was fiercely guarded by these two felines the whole time. I'm not able to hold the mouse anymore, so okay, everything's okay. When the belt was finally readied for the trip to the UK, nearly 5,000 beads had been woven onto it. And it was carefully wrapped for its journey to the UK. And in the wrap, we also had, we had put tobacco, which is a traditional healing medicine for us, and also a small bag, a medicine bag that I had made. For some reason, I can't get my mouse because I wanted to be able to show. Oh, there it is. Despite that COVID happened, so as you know, the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower arrival happened in 2020, and so many things got canceled. There was very little that happened here at all, and a lot of the events that had been planned for the UK had to be canceled. But we had gotten a jump on everything because, as I said, the Wampanoag advisors to projects started in 2014. So we had, in addition to this, we developed a traveling exhibit that was called Captured. Well, actually the whole exhibit was called, it was Wampanoag history, the Wampanoag story, 400 years of Wampanoag history. And it started out with an exhibit called Captured 1614 that talked about those kidnappings. But by the time 2020 happened, we had already booked this exhibit in several museums in the UK, including the Guildhall in London. I don't know if any of you have ever been there or seen it. When I went in there and saw where they were planning to put my exhibit, I mean, there was like all of this, really fancy, gilded. It was gilded. It goes by its name, and fancy statues, and I thought, oh my God, you're gonna put our Wampanoag belt in here, and it was pretty cool. So it did actually get exhibited in the Guildhall. Also, there was another museum it was a brand new museum called The Box. This is what the exhibit looks like. There we go. There was a brand new museum in Plymouth, England, and it was called The Box. This is how it looked in the box. That was a museum of art and history and ideas, and they literally had thousands of masked guests that came through. That wanted to learn about our belt and our history and our search for Metacom's belt. In 2021, as they promised, the belt was returned to us after it had made its rounds to all the museums. And I do want to say there was a lot of coverage. BBC it seemed like every other day I was, on some kind of a BBC program. I didn't realize they had so many different outlets for such a thing. The Guardian newspaper, there was a lot of press about this. And unfortunately, there was no lead to what had happened to Metacom's belt. I don't like to think that this project failed, because I don't think it did. I think that this project won in so many ways. Now that it is back among us, we have a plan to continue to work on it, to continue to tell more stories with this belt, and to continue to inspire our community to be engaged in these cultural activities. And we bring it to, it does sometimes go on exhibit at other museums, but always with the caveat, if you have this belt in the museum and we need it for something else to be used in our community, they have to let it go. Because we also use it at ceremonies, and ceremonies might sometimes be a funeral or a wedding or something like that, and at powwows and at community gatherings. So it is still very much, it's very much a part of our community, and people enjoy engaging with the belt. I did bring it with me. As you can see, it's at the front of the room when we're finished talking about it, which I'm pretty much finished talking about it, but I know a lot of you are going to have questions. So I'm happy to answer your questions in a formal sense. And then afterwards, if you would like to come up and see it and touch it, you are more than welcome to see our welcome belt. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Yes?
What kind of prayers do you say over the belt?
Just the same kind of prayers. Well, I don't know if you're a religious person, but I know that like when I bring the belt into the circle for powwow, I mean, I would bring it with some tobacco, and I would be asking the creator to honor our ceremony and to honor our people. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what kind of a ceremony we're engaged in. If I were bringing this belt to someone's funeral, a passing, I would be using this belt to communicate with the creator and asking for, our loved one to be welcomed into the home of the creator. That kind of a thing. Yes.
Are there any other examples of wampum belts that are in Wampanoag custody?
There are now. This project, well, actually right before this project happened, there was a tribe member who made a much smaller belt and actually brought it to the UN, and sometimes wampum belts were used to create treaties. And there's one that was really famous. It was called the two-row wampum. You can look that up, and it was from the Iroquois to William Penn. And it's a very simple wampum belt that has 2 rows of purple wampum on a great sea of white. And essentially, I can't recite it exactly. Essentially, what it means is you stay on your side of the river, we stay on our side of the river, but we walk together and, in peace. Or I just screwed that up royally, but look it up for a better description. But anyway, one of my nephews made a belt and brought it to the UN, and with that kind of thought in mind. He didn't give it to them though, because that was smart. So there are now other examples of wampum belts that are being made. This belt has done its job in that way, that people are inspired to do this kind of work. Yes?
I know it was kind of explained in the video, but can you go into further detail on how you think they were able to make?
Historically?
Yeah.
I did ask Jason, the bead master, if he would do that. And I said, just make one bead like that. And he goes, yeah, I'm gonna do that. But in his defense, he made like 90% of the beads that are on here. He was very busy. But the only one that I know of that has done it in the traditional manner was the other guy that you saw with the bow drill. And a bow drill would be used to, they think it's possible that they could have used a nail or something that would have been traded. And keeping in mind that trade goods as early as the 1500s were coming into the area. So things like nails and knives and needles and things like that were available to people. And they're thinking that that's what was used. But I just marveled at the beads that I saw in the UK. And yeah, like who does that? Okay. Well, one more. Yeah.
About the belt, like you said, you're continually adding onto it, so no belt is ever finished.
Mm-hmm.
Is there are they ever made for like particular people? Like Metacom's belt was like obviously made for him, or was it just kind of like passed down?
My understanding was it wasn't made for him. It was passed down, and especially if you consider that belt was 9 feet long. And the way that they figured that is because Benjamin Church, who was probably a short guy, but he was probably about 5 feet tall, about my height. He wore it around. He put it on around his neck, and it reached down to his ankles. And it was 9. We did make this to be 9 inches wide. So if you could imagine this belt, 9 inches wide and 9 feet long, that's many years and many generations of contributors. And what we believe is that belt had been made, started maybe in the 1500s or maybe in the early 1600s. It was just a beautiful, that belt had been touched by probably thousands of Wampanoag people. And each time that someone would contribute to the belt, they would contribute a part of themselves, a story, something that, and the belt would travel as the leader who was carrying it would bring it around. And you can imagine him sort of sitting at a fireside and talking to the children and saying, see, this is a bear that we've made here because so-and-so hunted for bear, and this is what there were stories that went along that only they knew, but they passed them on from generation to generation. So that's how those stories got really held and kept. All right. Well, you guys have been a really awesome audience, and I'm really glad that I finally got to come here and visit with you guys. And I'd like to welcome you to come and visit with my belt. Thank you.